Hi there. In this video, I'm going to introduce GA4 and go through the concept of what it is exactly, how it's different to Universal Analytics. So you may have logged into GA4 already, and it does look quite different to what you're maybe used to in Universal. And other videos will go through how to use the reports in a bit more detail and how to set up the tracking. However, here I'm going to take a step back and just introduce you to the main differences of what GA4 is. So if we think about the journey to GA4, there have been some different instances of Google Analytics. So the very first one back in 1998 was Urchin. So you may know the term UTM tracking. So that actually stands for Urchin Tracking Module. So Urchin was actually then bought out by Google. And it became Google Analytics in 2005. And at this stage, it introduced some new exciting features like e-commerce tracking. And over the years around here, this also introduced asynchronous code. So that improved loading speed for pages a bit faster. So there were some improvements as time went on to the code itself and taking a bit more consideration into the performance of the tag setup. Then Universal Analytics came along in 2012. So we got rid of the old classic Google Analytics, and UA really was all about the users. So connecting the dots between users on different devices. And that introduced things like the user ID. So you could put a user ID on your website and it would connect people from, like, if they're using a desktop and they're using a mobile. And it was really all about connecting the user between different devices here. Now we've come on to GA4, which is really about the app and web experience. So this really aims to unify the reporting between app and web. So how does it work? It's actually quite similar to UA in terms of the tracking code. It collects some information, so that the client ID, which is basically like the browser, and it's unique for a browser and user. That's what dictates a user. You will then have the timestamp, and then the event name. So for example, this piece of information will then tell you that there's a page view made by this user at this time. And then every event has this information, and then it allows you to sort of build a bit of a timeline of that user's journey. There's obviously a tracking code as well, the tracking ID. So that is unique for each GA4 property. And that just dictates essentially where this data goes. It then batches these events up and it sends information into the GA servers as a ping. So the main tag of GA4 is a page view, and with that comes a few events which are automatically tracked. So this is automatically enabled when you set up a GA4 property. We'll go into this in a bit more detail in a separate video, but this includes obviously page views, session starts, so that dictates when a session is and how many sessions there are for a user. Their first visit, user engagements, so that's stuff like clicks and activeness on the page. When someone reaches 90% of a page, an event is fired. When someone clicks an outbound link, event is fired. When someone does a site search, an event is fired, and when someone does a file download, an event is fired. So these are all things which are automatically tracked anyway as soon as you set up the tag and create a GA4 property, which is aimed to reduce the amount of implementation that you need to do at a basic level. So the main difference of GA4 to UA is how it's set up. So you may be used to Universal Analytics showing a user, a session, and then an event. So you can typically see the number of sessions that a user does, and then within those sessions, you can then see like the page views and all the events that happen. However, in GA4, you don't see sessions grouped in as you would in UA. So you typically will just see a user, and then you see all the events that user has done. There will be points within these events where you'll see session starts. So for example, this fourth event and this first and fourth event might be a session start. So that would dictate a new session, but it's not automatically grouped essentially within GA4 as a separate session. So for this user, we could count the number of session starts that has happened in a date range. So if it's here and here, then that would mean that user would have 2 sessions, but it's not classed as separate sessions in GA4. The good thing for this, it makes it so much easier to analyze customer journeys, because you can just tie all the events together for a user. And if you've got BigQuery connected, you can really easily sort of unnest that data and then analyze the user journey. So I'm just going to run over some other benefits of GA4. So the first great benefit is that it has unsampled data. So in Universal Analytics, you may have run into sampling. That is simply when you have a large number of hits coming into the accounts. It samples massively, and you would have had to maybe pay for Analytics 360 to have that unsampled data. However, in GA4, that limit is no longer there, and you have unsampled data in your reports, which is great. There's also a free connection to BigQuery, so they're really encouraging people to set up BigQuery connections. This is really useful if you do have sort of, I'd say, larger volumes of data, but it's useful for anyone really. However, it does require a sort of data pipelining knowledge and SQL knowledge as well if you're going to actually look into that data and use it. But it does make it so much easier to analyze the data within BigQuery. There is the first 10 gig of storage per month is free within BigQuery, but if you have a large amount of data where the storage is more than 10 gig a month, then you'll need to pay for that storage. However, the connection to it is completely free. The other obvious great benefit is that a roll-up between app and web is possible. So this is now because they're using the same tracking library, that you can tie a user between app and web, and you can have your app and web data within the same property, whereas you couldn't do that previously in Universal Analytics. Another benefit for actually the user is improved privacy. So GA4 doesn't store IP addresses, where however UA in UA Google does store the IP address. So this means that IP addresses are anonymized, and this just means it's definitely sort of reassuring in terms of GDPR compliant. So the next benefit is around conversion modeling. So there is a bit of a blurry line here from Google. However, a summary of this is that if there's cookie limitations on a particular, say, browser, or users disabled their cookies, GA4 will predict that user's behavior based on similar activity of users it is able to track. So you may find some of the conversions displayed are actually predictions of users who they're not actually able to track specifically. So again, this is a bit of a blurry line, but it sort of is predicting the full tracking of your site, where there are obviously more issues with third-party tracking at the moment. The next benefit in GA4 is around parameters. So in each event that you track, let's say you're tracking a form completion, you can track up to 25 event parameters. So this is basically 25 bits of additional information within that event. So that could be something like the form name, a profession of the person who's completing the form, other information that you want to track around that. And it's not just limited to in UA, you can only track event category, event action, and event label. And we're going to go into a bit more detail around that because that's really important for your implementation. But that's just a really great benefit that you can now have a lot more information tied to each event. The other great thing about GA4 is audience reporting. So there are some additional options in GA4 that you didn't have in UA. So stuff like churn and conversion predictions. So you can actually create an audience of users who are likely to convert based on your GA4 data or likely to churn. And you can then tie that into your Google Ads and you can retarget to them specifically. So that's something you couldn't quite do in UA, but again, it's using machine learning to look at your using your data to see which users are going to churn or potentially are close to converting, and then you can use that to retarget how you want to. So that was a quick intro on the benefits of GA4 and kind of how it's evolved. There will be some other videos on how to use GA4 in a bit more detail and how to set it up. Just before that, we will be using mainly in the videos the Google demo account. So I'd strongly recommend adding this if you want to have a play around and look at some of the features. So to get to that, just Google demo account Google Merchandise Store, and you should have an article like this. And then you scroll down and you can simply just add the GA4 property here. And there's also one for UA as well. So this is really great to just have a play around and have a look at some features that you may not have implemented on your site that maybe you want to have implemented. It's just good to see how Google have done it. So that's it for the intro, and see you soon.